You've done this before, arrived early, documents ready, bags packed the same way you always do. For years, airport travel followed a pattern you understood, but in 2026, something feels different. You move through security and suddenly the process slows. Instructions sound stricter, questions feel more direct. Even simple steps take longer than you remember. Then you see it happen. A passenger, older, experienced, clearly not doing anything wrong, gets pulled aside for extra screening. No argument, no explanation, just delayed. And that's the moment most travelers don't expect, because these aren't new rules being announced. They're new rules being applied. And in 2026, travelers over 65 are being affected in ways most people don't even realize yet. In the next 15 minutes, you'll see the airport rules that are quietly changing for senior travelers, and why the same habits that worked for years are suddenly causing delays, confusion, and unexpected stops. Quick question: when was your last flight, and did anything feel stricter than before? Because what's happening right now isn't obvious, but it's affecting the exact moment most travelers think they're already done with the process. Extra screening is happening more often, and it's not random. For many years, experienced travelers built a sense of confidence around airport security. You knew the flow, understood the process, and moved through it without much difficulty. That consistency created an expectation that if you followed the basics, everything would go smoothly. But recently, something subtle has shifted. Screening isn't just about what you carry anymore, it's about patterns. And certain patterns are being reviewed more closely than before. What makes this confusing is that it doesn't feel targeted in an obvious way. There's no announcement, no warning, no clear explanation. But passengers over 65 are sometimes selected for additional screening simply because of travel behavior patterns, longer pauses, uncertainty with instructions, or unfamiliarity with updated procedures. One traveler described being stopped twice in a single trip, not because of anything in their bag, but because they hesitated during instructions. It's not about age itself. It's about how systems interpret behavior, and that's why what feels normal to you might now trigger extra attention without any clear reason. And for many travelers, that's only the first slowdown. The next step is where the timing really starts working against you. 2. Digital boarding changes are creating hidden delays. Air travel is becoming more digital every year. Mobile boarding passes, self-check kiosks, automated gates. It's all designed to speed things up. But for many senior travelers, this shift introduces a different kind of challenge. It's not about understanding the system completely, it's about how quickly you can adapt to it in real time. When lines move fast and screens replace human interaction, even a small delay in navigation can cause a ripple effect behind you. This is where frustration starts building quietly. A traveler pauses at the scanner, unsure where to position the code, while the line behind continues to grow. No one says anything, but the pressure is felt, and in some cases that hesitation leads to assistance being called, which slows the process further. It's not a major issue, but it creates visibility, and visibility at checkpoints often leads to more scrutiny. That's why many experienced travelers are now double-checking their digital setup before arriving, not because they can't manage it, but because the system no longer slows down to accommodate hesitation the way it once did. And even if you avoid that completely, the process doesn't slow down for the next part either. 3. Medication checks are becoming more detailed. For senior travelers, carrying medication is part of the routine. It's something that's been done for years without much thought. Pack it, keep it accessible, and move through security as usual. But in 2026, the attention around medications is becoming more structured, especially when items aren't clearly labeled or stored in original packaging. What used to pass quickly is now sometimes paused for a closer look. This doesn't mean something is wrong, but it does mean the process takes longer. A traveler recently mentioned being asked to explain multiple items during screening, not because they were restricted, but because they weren't immediately identifiable. That extra step adds time, and in a fast-moving line, it creates pressure. The shift isn't about restricting what you carry, it's about clarity. And when clarity isn't immediate, the system pauses to verify. That's where preparation makes the difference, not because the rules change dramatically, but because the tolerance for uncertainty has become much lower than before. But what matters more isn't what you're carrying, it's how the system reacts when something takes longer than expected. 4. Assistance requests are being logged differently. Asking for help at the airport has always been part of the experience, especially for travelers who prefer a smoother process. Wheelchair services, guided assistance, priority boarding, these options are still available, but the way they are managed is evolving. Requests are now more structured, often tracked digitally, and expected to match the situation at the airport. That means inconsistencies are more noticeable than before. In some cases, travelers request assistance but then move independently once they arrive. That used to go unnoticed. Now it can raise questions, not in a confrontational way, but in a procedural one. Systems are designed to align requests with actual need, and when they don't match, it creates a pause in the process. One traveler found themselves waiting longer than expected because their assistance request needed to be verified before boarding. It wasn't denied, but it wasn't immediate either. That's the change. It's no longer just about asking. It's about consistency between what's requested and what's observed. Quick question. Have you ever asked for help at the airport and still felt like things slowed down instead of getting easier? There's a reason for that, and it shows up in the next step. 5. Carry-on packing mistakes are hitting seniors. Harder packing habits don't change easily, especially when they've worked for years. But in 2026, enforcement around carry-ons is becoming stricter, and that shift is affecting travelers who rely on familiar routines. Items placed in certain compartments, bags slightly overfilled, or personal items that used to pass without question are now being evaluated more closely at the gate. What makes this more difficult is timing. These checks often happen when boarding is already in progress, leaving little room to adjust. A traveler who packed the same way for years may suddenly be asked to reorganize or check their bag, not because they were careless, but because enforcement tightened without clear notice. And in that moment, the pressure isn't just about the rule, it's about the speed of the decision. That's why even small packing habits now matter more than they used to. Not because they changed, but because the system around them did. If you travel even once a year, these small shifts are exactly what cause unexpected delays. So make sure you're subscribed. Because from this point on, it's not about what you bring, it's about how the system reads you. 6. ID checks are becoming less flexible than before. Showing identification used to be one of the easiest parts of air travel. As long as your ID was valid and recognizable, the process moved quickly without much attention. But that quiet flexibility is fading. Verification systems are becoming more precise, and small inconsistencies that were once overlooked are now being flagged more often. It's not about major errors, it's about details. A slight variation in how your name appears, an older form of identification, or even hesitation while presenting documents can slow the process down in ways that weren't common before. This shift is tied to broader changes in identity verification standards, including updates introduced by the Transportation Security Administration under the Real ID program. The process itself hasn't become complicated, but it has become stricter in how consistently it's applied. That means fewer assumptions and more verification. For travelers who are used to moving through quickly, this can feel unexpected. But once that extra check begins, the pace changes immediately, and it's not something you can speed up in the moment. And once that verification slows things down, everything behind it starts compressing faster than you expect. 7. Boarding pace is faster, but less forgiving. Boarding used to have a rhythm that allowed for small delays. If you paused, adjusted your bag, or waited a moment before joining your group, the process still worked itself out. But that rhythm has changed. Airlines are now moving passengers through in tighter windows with less room for hesitation. Boarding groups are called quickly, and once your group is moving, the expectation is that you move with it, not after it. This creates a situation where timing matters more than people expect. A short delay, something as simple as waiting for the line to clear or checking your seat assignment again, can cause you to miss the natural flow, and once that happens, re-entering the process isn't always smooth. It's not that the system is stricter in a visible way, it's that it no longer pauses to absorb those small gaps. For travelers who are used to a more relaxed pace, that difference can feel sudden even though it's been building quietly over time. And when that pace increases, even simple instructions stop being as forgiving as they used to be. 8. Security instructions are delivered once, not repeated. There was a time when airport security felt guided step by step. Staff would repeat instructions clearly, often more than once, making sure everyone understood what to do. That repetition helped create a slower but more forgiving process. Now the structure is different. Instructions are still given, but they're delivered quickly and expected to be followed immediately. The system assumes awareness rather than building it in real time. When a step is missed, the process doesn't adjust to catch you up. Instead, it resets your position in the line. A traveler who forgets to remove an item or misplaces something in the bin may find themselves stepping aside to correct it while others continue moving forward. That's where the pressure builds. It's not about making mistakes, everyone does. It's about how the system responds to them. And today that response is faster, more structured, and less repetitive than before. But here's what most people don't connect. Missing one small step doesn't just slow you down, it changes how closely you're watched next. 9. Behavior is being noticed more than before. Security isn't focused only on bags and documents anymore. There's increasing attention on how passengers move through the process. Not in a dramatic or obvious way, but through simple observation. Movement, reactions, and patterns all contribute to how the situation is assessed. Someone who appears unsure repeatedly adjusts their belongings or hesitates during instructions may draw more attention than someone moving steadily through each step. This doesn't mean anything is wrong, but it does change how the experience unfolds. A traveler once mentioned being asked additional questions simply because they paused multiple times while organizing their items. Nothing in their bag was an issue, but the repeated stops created a pattern that stood out. Reviews by the Government Accountability Office have noted that behavior-based screening methods are still part of security approaches, even if their effectiveness is debated. That means observation remains part of the system, whether passengers realize it or not. And that's where the process quietly shifts from checking your bag to observing how you move through it. 10. Waiting areas are more structured than they look. The space near the gate used to feel informal. Passengers would sit wherever they found room, stand near the desk, or move freely while waiting for boarding to begin. That freedom is becoming more structured. Seating areas are being aligned with boarding groups, and movement near the gate is more controlled than it appears at first glance. It's not always enforced directly, but the layout itself encourages a more organized flow. This subtle structure changes how passengers are expected to position themselves. Standing outside your boarding zone or moving too close to the gate early can draw attention, even if it seems harmless. A traveler described being redirected simply for waiting near the front before their group was called. It wasn't a mistake, but it didn't match the flow the system was guiding. These small adjustments don't feel like rules, but they influence how smoothly everything moves once boarding begins. 11. Familiar travel habits don't always fit anymore. Experience used to make travel easier. The more you flew, the more confident you became in your routine. You knew when to arrive, how to pack, how to move through each step without thinking twice. That familiarity created efficiency. But when the system around those habits changes, even slightly, the same routine can start to feel out of sync without any obvious reason. That's what many travelers are experiencing now. It's not that they're doing anything wrong, it's that the environment has shifted just enough to create friction. A step that used to take seconds now takes longer. A process that felt automatic now requires more attention. These changes are subtle, but they add up. And when they do, the overall experience feels different, even if the individual steps look the same on the surface. 12. The system isn't adjusting to you anymore. One of the biggest differences in 2026 is how the system responds to passengers. In the past, there was more flexibility built into the process. Small delays, minor confusion, or slight deviations were absorbed without much impact. Today, the system is designed to keep moving, with less adjustment for individual pacing. That doesn't make it harsher, but it does make it less adaptable in real time. What this means in practice is simple. The process continues whether you're ready or not. If you're prepared, everything feels smooth. If you're not, even briefly, the system moves ahead without you, and catching up becomes harder than it used to be. That's why preparation now feels different. It's no longer about avoiding mistakes entirely. It's about minimizing the moments where the system has to wait for you, because increasingly, it doesn't. Now I'm curious, have you noticed anything feeling stricter or faster during your last trip? Drop your experience below. I read every single one. And if you want to stay ahead of how airports are really changing, make sure you're subscribed, because the next updates won't be announced. They'll show up when you least expect them.